So we thought it would be a good idea just to talk about how to just kind of manage the exercise piece right now in COVID-19 and talk about a few things that we do with our patients here that can help you all with your own patients if you're working with them, or even with yourself if you're kind of feeling frazzled or triggered right now, or just finding these exercise urges elevated. So I guess with no further ado, we'll just kind of move right into this piece. And then, of course, we'll open the floor to questions and all that stuff towards the end. So I'm only going to chat for about minutes or so, and then we'll definitely leave some time so that we can all kind of coffee chat afterwards. And I love answering lots of questions that you might have. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is the concept of neuroplasticity. So this whole thing's not going to get super sciencey. I'm just going to start with this one little kind of science type topic. And this topic is that neuroplasticity is just the concept that our brain doesn't stop changing when we become an adult. So previously in science, we thought that the brain just stopped developing and that once we got to a certain age, that's what we were left with. But there's this concept within the past decade that neuroplasticity is the change of our actual brain function and the patterns that it kind of like goes down. So you guys probably all have the awareness that we have our patterns. We tend to repeat our patterns. We have our habits. People's habits are different. So what's happened is our own brain has decided to go down these paths, and they've kind of created these paths. But we can actually change our pathways, and the brain can actually make those shifts physiologically, neurologically, and all of those. The cool piece here, but it's kind of a catch-22, is that when you do exercise, you actually improve neuroplasticity of the brain. So you improve this process. The catch-22 in our field is that we have sometimes eating disorder patterns or negative patterns that do need to be changed. So it's kind of like this really funny, ironic thing that exercise helps this piece, but sometimes the pattern we're actually working on rerouting is like our eating disorder pattern. So when I'm teaching clients, I always kind of discuss this topic briefly, and then I start to call it our hiking trails. So I'll give you that analogy. So basically, when you see a big mountain that you're going to go hike on, and I like this because it's kind of like a joyful movement type thing. We love like getting our patients to the point where they can go on a hike and feel like really fantastic about it. When you look at that mountain, these trails are like really ingrained. You can see them from way back on that mountain. Like you kind of know where the trail is already in this mountainside because it's a well-traveled path. So that's exactly the way these are in our brain. It's a really well-traveled path. So we know to make a new trail, like could you imagine going on a hike and making a new trail in a mountain? It's like you have to cut down trees, you have to mash down all this like high grass and the weeds, and like it's going to take a while and it's going to take work. And this is where the work is for our patients and for changing our thought patterns around exercise. So eventually this path starts to form, and over time, you can step back from that mountain and you can see that new path that you created, even though it took a lot of work, but it starts to show up. And if you stop taking the other path, it starts to grow over and it's pretty much becomes non-existent. This takes time, this takes work, and we have to show up and kind of work on that piece. So that's kind of what we're going to unpack a little bit today. And I want to talk to you guys in a way that you can almost think about this for yourself and think about how these patterns may be showing up for you, how you can navigate them a little bit, and then how you can start to make some changes and kind of like help yourself if you're running into urges, or help patients if they're struggling as well. Everybody on board with that? You can just kind of like give me a thumbs up since everybody's muted. Okay, awesome. So diving in, we're getting less sciencey here now, thank goodness, right? we're going to talk about how to navigate the intention. So the very first thing I really like for all my patients to do, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move you guys for a second. This is like the funny reality right now of being on these online calls is like people are like walking in other rooms, doing all this stuff. But I'm just going to show you guys my whiteboard so you can see how I set this up, and then how you guys can do this on your own piece of paper. So here's my whiteboard. Looks like everybody can see me okay. We good? All right. So the first thing I like for everybody to do is create a T-chart. So you can do this on a piece of paper for yourself right now if you want, or just kind of take notes. You can share it with your people, with your patients you're working on. So we do a big T. Let me make this a little more there. And then what we want to do is on this side, we do eating disorder intention, and then recovery. And Hannah, Kate, or Emily, if you're ever like, I can't see that or something, can you unmute yourself and let me know? Okay, so you basically make an entire page, eating disorder intention, recovery intention, and this is going to be very individual, you guys. Obviously, all of our patients, if you're struggling with this, this is like your story and your work. So it's important to know that when I'm working with patients, I'm meeting with every single one of them one-on-one, and we're unpacking their story, their deal, their issue, and there is no two the same. And that's really important to remember, because you've got to make this your own. You've got to apply it to your individual patients. This isn't something that you can just like across the board, like put everybody in a box to do. So, and that's with the whole treatment in general. So when we're filling this out, I'm just going to put on like some really common ones that we hear about a lot. So our first one is to lose weight. I hear a lot about trying to burn a specific amount of calories. Compensate. We do our groups in the morning, so a really common one is like, I'm trying to compensate for breakfast. I followed my meal plan today, and I really want to I just want to burn breakfast off. So it depends on the eating disorder mind. Sometimes it's not wrapped up in specific numbers. It's just like, I'm just compensating for a meal. So compensate whichever way your mind wants to do that, or the patient's mind. We have get to a certain amount of time. I also have very terrible handwriting, so I apologize if after I read this, you're like, I can't even read that. So I'm trying to verbally say it as I write it, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just chime in.
I can send out an example too, Adrianne, if you want after.
What'd you say?
I said I can also email out something after to like give an example.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be cool. So get to a certain time or duration. And I'm going to put one on here that is kind of like one that comes up a lot, but it's this middle of the road one, and I'll explain why I kind of put it over here. Get toned. So getting toned is like a big desire in our fit culture. We have a lot of that in social media kind of being thrown in our face. And I typically put it in the eating disorder category. And that's because anybody we're working with clearly has an eating disorder or had an eating disorder at some point, is in recovery. So when we start getting wrapped up with exercise to change our body, the physical appearance of our body, it can really tip us over the edge or be just that push that gets us like sliding into other behaviors or just hitting that downhill slippery slope. So I really like to shift away from having being toned or changing the body be any kind of intention with our exercise in this space. And let's see, getting ready for a certain event, vacation, trip, stuff like that. So these are some common ones. let's see. And I'm also just going to put more equals better, because a lot of people, the eating disorder has taken that health piece and run with it. So I have a lot of patients that it originally all started with the intention of being healthy, and then it gets pushed further and further and further, and then it's just like really challenging to get control of that and stop at a certain time, and kind of like not exercise for 5 hours a day. So more does not equal better. So that was just kind of a little one that I wanted to throw in there that sort of ties into this, but most of these are things that we'll see come up when you start to think, what is an intention for exercise that could be a little more in the eating disorder side? Then we go to recovery. A recovery intention could be to boost the mood, increase energy, decrease stress. Caveat here. We put out a little social media post through Montecatini on Saturday. If you didn't see it, please go back to the social media and check it out. I talk about how if coping with stress with exercise is your only coping skill, that runs into a big issue here, especially right now with COVID-19, where everybody's really stressed. And if you've thrown your toolbox out the window right now, and the only thing you can think of is to calm yourself with stress, stress with exercise, then we have an issue. So we obviously know that one of the benefits of exercise is to reduce stress, but we just need to be really careful that it's not our or our patient's only coping skill here. What else? Fun, community, reduce anxiety, reduce depression. So these are some that would be kind of like more recovery-minded intentions. And I have all my patients do this, and these lists can be endless. And what it needs to do is really be very specific to you and specific to your patient. So this looks really different for everyone, and everybody has a different story in their mind, right? We're always like, this is the story I'm telling myself. So everybody's story is a little different, and it's really important that we first sort these out, because when we want to start working on toxicity, it's just really helpful, especially in the very beginning when your patients can't even think straight. It's really helpful to kind of sort these in your brain, kind of get it on paper. We have a few comments in the chat. If anyone seems like something.
Yeah, I was just saying, if everybody wants to put their info in the chat, then I can send it all out after the meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't know if people were asking questions.
Yeah, if you guys want to ask questions throughout, feel free to type them, or just unmute yourself and you can chime in.
Yeah, totally. So in fact, while we're thinking of chiming in, does anybody have ideas of something they would put on either side here that hasn't been put on here?
Somebody else talking?
No, go for it.
So as somebody in recovery from severe exercise addiction, I see a lot of those recovery minded as a lot of my motives in the eating disorder field, or in the eating disorder side. But like you said, it was my only coping skill for stress, anxiety, depression. But now one of my big motivations, it just feels so good to move, whether it's a walk or an intense workout.
Good. So do you still struggle with taking a balanced approach, duration wise?
No, especially now that my husband's working from home, I have a lot of accountability around that. And I said it like, I'm only going to work out up to X amount of minutes, and I'm not going to work out more than X amount of days in a row or in a week. And really holding myself accountable to that and verbalizing that intention and that balance with somebody who's going to be supportive.
Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like you've now this piece for yourself there, and that when you're starting your exercise, you are stating the intention ahead of time, and then you're able to have enough accountability at the moment to like be doing this in a healthy way. That's pretty much what determines, are we moving in a recovery way or are we not moving in a recovery way? It's basically comes down to what's the intention and where's the fuel. So as long as you're like following your meal plan, the fuel is there, and your intentions are positive or on the recovery side, then green light. Like, let's do this. We know exercise is good, you know, the body, like, let's go ahead. But if you're catching yourself sneaking over here, and to be honest about it at the time, then we start to put the light on, or we need to start to redirect or reframe, which is kind of the next piece that we build on. So makes sense to everything, kind of like separating these on paper first, figuring out for yourself what your eating disorder intention reasons for moving are, what recovery reasons for moving are.
So what was that?
Oh, I was saying, does this kind of make sense to everybody on like separating these in the beginning before we move into a piece? I'm nods. So that looks, so once we've kind of sorted these out, this can be kind of our groundwork for knowing if the action we're about to take is serving recovery or if it's starting to send us back into eating disorder or maybe shifting us backwards. So we first always want to check back and see where we are when we're starting the action, right? So before we get involved with exercise, what is my intention and which side of this chart are we landing on here? Then basically the next piece we will kind of go into, and this is kind of the next piece that I work on with patients here, is that we need to go into what are the patterns, what are the thoughts. So whenever you start moving, there's going to always be like 3 to 5 main thoughts that happen or that come up during your movement. So this one we get started on really early with patients because we do, as soon as patients are medically stable, to be walking and doing our yoga and doing soothing stretch one-on-one, like mat time with me in residential level. They are getting involved, and let's use the walk for example. They'll go on, we have these short walks in the morning that our patients can go on, and their thought that might be enmeshed in their eating disorder with the exercise piece will come up even in that 15-minute walk that they're starting with in res. So we can start working on these like day one, because with our neuroplasticity concept we talked about in the beginning, we already have these paths. We all go down these patterns. So some of you guys, and you can kind of nod or tell me in signaling here, when you go, let's say you go to the gym, your workout, there's always these like initial thoughts that start happening, or these recurring patterns, or motivation to get you there was a certain intention, and after we just did the T-chart, it may have been one side or the other, who knows, but once we start moving, our brain goes down that path. So once I start walking, I'm going to automatically start thinking, whatever my brain has always gone down. So maybe it was that breakfast one we talked about. So like if a patient says, every time I come into wellness hour, I compensate for breakfast, that's going to keep coming up. It's going to keep coming up literally every single time this person starts engaging in exercise. That's your brain pattern. So what we really do is pull out exactly what these patterns are every single time start diving into movement. And our body's just kind of like memory oriented anyways like that. Once you start doing something, moving the body that you've done before, and then you have these certain thoughts doing it, it's like right when you start doing that again, those thoughts just kind of come up. It's the same way we associate like smells with certain time events, places, all of that stuff. So when we start engaging in movement, it's almost always the same 3 to 5 thoughts that are repeating for every individual here. For ourselves and patients. So what we need to do is pull out that main thought for them. And this varies. This is like where it gets really different for everybody. And this has a lot to do with like, what's your background? Were you an athlete? Well, you're going down these kind of like athlete-minded roads, right? My run needs to be this time. My run needs to be this long. My no pain, no gain. All of our like slogans. So what we then have to do is redirect it. So every time my thought compensate for breakfast, I basically have the patient come up with their new reframe redirect. They make it up. We kind of like work together, but it needs to be something they can get behind. I mean, you guys know how redirects and reframes work. Like, you can't just BS this. Like, you can't just stop be like, well, if I'm going to be in recovery, I know I can't compensate for breakfast. There's my redirect. Like, that's not going to work. It has to be something your patient can really create and get behind. I don't know. We can make this one. The patient said, I want to compensate for breakfast. It may redirect to maybe their education has showed that I need to go into exercise with a full tank or with gas in my tank. I'll say gas in my tank, fuel in my tank, right? We'll call it fuel because that's what we're always kind of using terminology wise. So with patients. So you cannot get in your car and go drive down the road with an empty gas tank. Not going to work. You're not going to make it out the driveway. So our patients are learning with our dietitians and our therapists as we're all working together that they can't start a workout without some fuel in their tank anyways. That's just not how our bodies work. So this is often a reframe that could be used because our patient has kind of gotten that education at this point. And I will say, once we're reframing thoughts, we're starting to do this once the patient is either doing the walks in residential or they're doing wellness hour and PHP and IOP time. So once they're in PHP and IOP, they're working with me in the wellness center, and this is when this gets real. So every time this patient walks in, whatever these 3 to 5 thoughts are going to keep happening, and it's going to happen really fast, and there's never going to be a time when that patient comes in and within like the first week or 2, they could actually make it through the whole hour without their brain going down this hiking trail it's been going down. We have to continue to redirect every time it starts to go down this path. So we do this for all 3 to 5, and I encourage you to kind of explore in yourself if you are struggling right now with these higher urges, to break this down for yourself. Like, what are these recurring patterns? Like, maybe when you go do some joyful movement this afternoon or later this week, you can kind of like bring a piece of paper with you and jot down what does go on in my mind. Why do I push myself that extra mile? What is the true intention? So you can start to navigate this a little bit. So this is where we create our hiking trail.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So like when you are redirecting though, because like something that comes up for me, because I used to run a lot and I used to run like half marathons, and that was kind of just like my outlet, and probably wasn't like the, you know, healthiest thing to be doing. But how would you redirect? Like when you're redirecting, are you just telling yourself that like as you're moving, or like what does that look like for the patients or for like somebody like me that's not in recovery?
Okay. So let's say you were going on a run and you already sorted this out on paper, and you thought that you needed to redirect. Once we decide the redirect, that's kind of the next place, is we decide what we're going to do about it. So in the beginning, sometimes our patients have to literally do almost an opposite action because they can't, you know, just like change the thought process or move away from it all the way at that time. So, and opposite action and movement isn't going to be go like sit on the couch in the other room and like leave the wellness center. It might be, I'm going to go lay on the mat for a second, do some breath work, do some stretching, and kind of reconnect and see if I can get my attention, and then I'll get back on the treadmill again. So we kind of have to like really work with the redirect. Because if you just like keep running and say to yourself, whatever the reframe is, like, I'm doing this for positive attention, I'm doing this for positive intention, that's probably not gonna like shift that pattern enough. So we have to stop and take the time to reassess and see if you can actually make a shift. And if not, then we need to push pause and possibly stop the movement altogether. You know, a lot in the like beginning phases of wellness group is patients will on maybe a cardio piece of equipment, and then we need to stop and shift over to the mat for a while, or shift to weights because maybe free weights doesn't get this dialogue going on in their head, or shift to, we have like all these fun things like skip it and hula hoops and all the things in our wellness center. So shifting to something else for a little while and then coming back in. So this takes like a time, but we have to like be shifting the thought and that real experience of actually trying and diving in and redirecting instead of just like avoiding thing altogether and not, you know, diving in a little bit. So
Adrianne, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So with like, how do you respond to, like, I have a ton of people contacting me on social media and saying things like, let's do push-up challenge, or like, let's do whatever. How do you react to people who don't have an eating disorder when they're using disordered thoughts and saying that?
It's kind of, I mean, whether you have an eating disorder or not, you have your intentions for exercise. And unfortunately, in our fit culture world, they tend to be disordered. So you, like, even if you don't have an eating disorder, it's still important to pause and assess your relationship with exercise. Like, why do I do this? What is my drive? And what thoughts come up while I'm doing this? Once I realize this isn't fun anymore, why do I keep doing this? You know? So we have to kind of dive into that piece, because what happens is most of our culture, the reality is like most people are doing exercise as like almost punishment, or they don't really want to, or they've just kind of like forced this routine onto themselves. And then it gets to the point where they could never shift their routine if they wanted to. So I still think whether you have an eating disorder, you've got to dive into relationship piece. When it comes to all these challenges that are being shoved in your face right now on social media, you kind of have to recognize like what's serving you and what's not. There's always silly stuff on social media, you know, that's like we eventually just block people. It's kind of, you know, reset your own algorithm in a way. If your Pinterest is full of like ways to get a six-pack and that's not working out for you, you need to delete all those and search for kittens and make sure that kittens start showing up on your Pinterest. That's how the algorithms like are kind of so you've got to recognize if seeing all these fitness challenges coming at you right now is too much, like pulling that off your social media, scrolling past it, that kind of thing, if it's becoming overwhelming right now. Does that answer? Okay. So yeah, this is kind of how we start to the thought patterns here. And right now, you may have noticed whatever a stress coping skill or a behavior is for you in life has been escalated because of our situation. The circumstance is what it is right now. We are in COVID-19, the world on its head, everybody's extremely stressed. So, recognizing the way you're dealing with your stress, seeing how your actions are backed up by kind of the belief, how you're dealing with the current situation, and where you can shift it for a result that you actually want right now. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but that's kind of another piece that we work on with our patients when we're working on just like cognitive behavioral therapy change within exercise. So kind of checking in with all that, seeing how all the social media is lining up and going from there. So I think we're kind of at our 40-minute mark or so. So I think what I'll do is just kind of like open the floor right now to questions, and then we kind of shifted that anyway, and go from there. Questions about current struggles you're having right now or what your patient's struggling with. I'll move this back out of the way and get a little better lighting going on here. So if you guys want, you can unmute and ask away. Any questions? There's so many people up here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, Hannah, Kate, and I have been talking a lot about, so thank you for this topic, the social media, just influx of, push-up challenges and making sure you're working out at home and the pressure to do that every day. And I think it's really hard right now because, I mean, it's a hard time and there's like all this pressure to do that for your mental health. So it's kind of ironic because it's like, oh, well, if I don't do it, then that's bad for my mental health. So it's like you feel the pressure, like you need to be active, you know, and it's not okay to just be sitting around. Like more than ever, it's not okay. You cannot be sitting at all. You need to be doing something all day.
And so, I feel like, sorry. I was going to say, and I feel like everybody's also posting it on social media. Like people usually like post their workouts on social media, but like now more than ever, it's like literally probably like half of the people that I'm following in their stories. It's like, I can see what what they did today, or like what their, you know, workout plan is, or like they check one of those like boxes for the different challenges or just any of that stuff. It's like, I don't care. And like, if you're working out, great, but like, you don't need to put it on social media because I feel like it makes other people just like feel bad about themselves or just feel like they have to go work out then. And it's just like a vicious cycle of like not what should be a good thing, but it's not.
Right. Yeah, with that, say, so oftentimes, especially once patients have kind of been working on the relationship piece for a while, we will go back into like fact checking, right? We'll always check our facts. So fact is, we know movement is healthy, but that would be movement that is about 30 minutes to an hour. Research shows that going over an hour negatively impacts our mental health. Therefore, anybody in this space is obviously like cares about the mental health component, really shouldn't be going over an hour. So we know that piece. And then which can kind of help put the brakes on when there's that challenge to a stop. Also, when it comes to like actual health and wellness, what we should be doing is actually needs to be fun. So we really don't positively impact our health if our movement is punishment, if you're just like bagging yourself, or you're like, I really don't want to work out today, and then you like go ahead and start doing it. That kind of like really isn't actually positively impacting our health and getting that mental benefit we're thinking it is. It's got to be fun. You should catch yourself smiling, usually connecting with people while you're doing so, or listening to a cool podcast or something. So, we have to remember that if we really want to benefit our health, it does have to be fun. We also have to have a conversation with our body that's not a one-way road. So we're usually telling our body all the time, this is what we need to do. But your body is talking back. And so I'm always teaching my patients to learn how to like listen to your body. I feel like working out today, but we're in COVID-19 and everybody on my social media is telling me I need to, like, then you're ignoring your body's communication with you and using your like brain to take over, and letting like your actual body's feelings help you learn or help you respond to what it truly wants. So that piece is really important too, is being able to actually listen to your body. That being said, we do focus our program also on our patients that fall into an avoidance situation where they may really start isolating and on the couch and under covers and crying all day. I had a call with a patient this morning that kind of went down that road. So we need to take positive steps. It's all about finding the gray here, right? Like, we're all black and white. So like, our mind is black or white. So it's all about the gray. So if you are finding yourself feeling like you literally just cannot get up and partake in any movement that's fun for you, we've got to take the steps also to see if we can make some baby changes, get a little into the gray area again. So there's kind of two sides of the coin. A lot of listening to your body and learning how to listen to your body, because that's actually a really tough skill to acquire, and kind of managing to what's being thrown in that way, if that makes sense.